She rented a hotel room to hide from her ex. The hotel owner was a mafia boss. The storm had begun long before Ilara reached the hotel. Rain hammered against the windshield, and the wind tore at the trees lining the winding cliff road. She gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white, her heart pounding faster than the raindrops outside. Behind her, she could feel the weight of the past chasing her, a man who refused to let her go. Her ex. The thought of him filled her with fear and anger, and she vowed that tonight she would finally be free. She didn't know exactly why she had chosen this hotel. The sign had been almost hidden, its letters faded and elegant. Devereux Hotel. The place looked like it had grown from the cliffs themselves, a fortress of stone and dark wood towering against the storm. Something about it felt alive, though she couldn't say why. Perhaps it was the stories she had overheard in whispered conversations, rumors of a place where the powerful and dangerous sometimes stayed, where secrets were kept under lock and key. Ilara parked the car in front of the grand entrance, the iron gates creaking as the wind pushed against them. She grabbed her bag and ran across the wet cobblestones, shivering as the cold rain soaked through her coat. The door to the hotel loomed ahead, carved with intricate patterns, almost like eyes watching her every move. Inside, the warmth hit her like a wave. Soft golden light spilled from chandeliers hung high above the marble floors. The smell of polished wood, old books, and something faintly floral filled the air. The lobby was empty, silent except for the occasional drip of water from the storm outside. A grand staircase wound upward, its dark banister twisting like the branches of an ancient tree. "Good evening," a voice said, smooth and deep. Ilara looked up. A man had appeared near the reception desk, tall and imposing, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that seemed to absorb the shadows around him. His hair was black as midnight, and his eyes were sharp, dark, and unreadable. Something about him made her pause, a shiver running down her spine. I need a room," she said, her voice trembling slightly. He nodded slowly, his gaze studying her as though he could see more than just her soaked coat and bag. "We have rooms, for one night." "Yes, one night, that's all I need," she replied quickly. She didn't want to give him any information, didn't want anyone knowing why she was here. He handed her a key without a word, the movement smooth and deliberate. "Room 312, third floor, east wing. Elevator is to your left." Ilara took the key, her fingers brushing against his briefly. The contact sent a strange spark up her arm, and she felt a sudden tension in the air. She ignored it and walked toward the elevator, glancing over her shoulder. He was watching her still, though he made no move to follow. The elevator doors closed, trapping her in a small, silent space. She pressed the button for the third floor and tried to calm her racing heart. She was safe now. She told herself that. Safe from him, safe from the man who had haunted her every step. When she stepped out on the floor, the corridor was dimly lit, lined with doors carved from dark mahogany. The carpet muffled her footsteps, but the silence made her every movement feel loud. She reached room 312 and fumbled with the key, her hands shaking. When the door finally clicked open, she stepped inside and closed it behind her, sliding the bolt. The room was quiet, safe. A warm glow from a single lamp filled the space, highlighting a large four-poster bed, a writing desk, and a window overlooking the stormy sea. Ilara sank onto the bed, letting out a long breath. She allowed herself a moment to relax, to feel the relief of having escaped, at least for tonight. But even as she tried to push the fear from her mind, a new feeling crept in, a sense that she was not entirely alone. The hotel was strange in a way she couldn't explain. The shadows seemed to move differently here, as though they were aware of her presence. The rain outside sounded sharper, like it carried secrets. Downstairs, Lucien Devereux watched her from his office balcony. He had noticed her the moment she arrived. Most people who came to his hotel were oblivious to him, or terrified, or simply bought into his reputation. But she was different. There was something in the way she moved, the way she carried herself despite the fear. Something raw and real, unafraid of the storm, even if it trembled in her heart. Lucian turned away from the balcony, his long fingers drumming against the desk. He had learned long ago that curiosity could be dangerous, that power must be controlled. Yet he found himself drawn to her, an instinct, not a choice. He couldn't explain why, only that he would watch and wait and see. Hours passed. The storm outside raged and Alara tried to sleep, but the sound of the rain against the window kept her on edge. Every creak of the building, every whisper of wind made her flinch. She checked the door lock again just to be sure. A sudden knock startled her. "Who is it?" she called, her voice tight with tension. The hallway was silent for a moment, then the knock came again. More deliberate this time, calm, almost polite. Alara hesitated, her heart pounding. She didn't expect anyone, no visitors, no interruptions. "Please, I don't want any trouble," she said, her voice shaking. The door handle turned slowly. Her eyes widened in terror, but the door didn't open. Instead, a deep voice spoke from the other side. "Relax, I am not here to harm you," the voice said, calm, measured, commanding. Alara didn't recognize it at first, but the tone, the certainty, made her heart skip. Who are you?" "You may call me Lucian," the voice replied. "I am the owner of this hotel." Her stomach sank. The owner, of course. Why would the owner be wandering the halls at this hour? But there was something else, a weight, a presence that made her instincts scream to be careful. I don't need any help. Please leave me alone," she said, though her voice was less steady than she intended. There was a pause. Then softly, almost like a whisper carried on the storm, he said, "Fear does not suit you, but neither does running forever. You may rest, if you allow yourself to." Alara's fingers trembled as she gripped the blanket tighter. She didn't understand why this stranger, this man with a voice like shadows and velvet, affected her so strongly. But she didn't have time to think. She had other dangers waiting beyond the walls of this hotel. The knock ceased. Silence returned. Alara sank against the pillows, eyes wide, ears straining for any sound. The hotel felt alive in a way that was both comforting and terrifying. She could almost feel it breathing, watching, waiting. And she couldn't shake the sensation that her life had changed the moment she had stepped through its doors. Hours later, she finally closed her eyes, exhaustion winning over fear. But sleep was uneasy, full of dreams of shadows and whispers, of a tall man with dark eyes and a quiet power standing in the storm, watching her, waiting. Somewhere deep in the hotel, Lucian leaned back in his chair, watching the monitors he kept hidden, seeing the room where she had settled. He let out a quiet sigh. Most people would have run at the sight of him. Most would have tried to leave or begged or trembled. But not her. She had fled danger before, and yet she carried herself with dignity, with strength. A strange thought crossed his mind. She was fragile, yes, but also fierce. She could survive, and perhaps she might even change him if he allowed himself to care. The night stretched on. Rain pounded the roof. Lightning illuminated the dark halls, and the hotel seemed to shift slightly in the shadows, as though sensing the presence of both fear and courage. Alara slept fitfully, unaware that the man she feared most, or the man she might someday trust, was only a floor below, watching, protecting, and waiting for the storm to pass. And in the early hours before dawn, as the wind moaned through the cliffs, a faint sound echoed in the corridors. Not the rain, not the storm, something deliberate. A footstep, a shadow moving in the hall outside her room. Alara stirred in her sleep, sensing the presence before she saw it. The door creaked just slightly, almost imperceptibly. Her eyes shot open. And she realized, with a jolt of fear and confusion, that she was not alone. Morning came slowly, gray and heavy, with the storm lingering over the cliffs. Rain dripped from the eaves, and the sea below crashed against jagged rocks, sending up sprays of white foam. Alara had barely slept. Her mind refused to rest, replaying the shadow outside her door, the strange voice she had heard, and the growing sense that this hotel was no ordinary place. When she finally opened her eyes, she found sunlight struggling through the clouds, faint and pale. The room was empty, quiet, almost too quiet. She rose from the bed, brushing the damp strands of hair from her face, and walked to the window. Below, the hotel grounds were slick with rain, the garden fountain spilling over, statues glistening with water. Despite the beauty, a sense of unease clung to her. A soft knock at her door startled her. "Who is it?" she called, her voice cautious. "May I come in?" said the deep, calm voice she had heard the night before. It belonged to the hotel owner, Lucian. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She hesitated, then answered, "Yes, I suppose." The door opened slowly, and he stepped inside. Lucian was even more imposing in the light. His black suit seemed darker against the pale walls, his tall frame filling the doorway. But what struck her most was the way he moved, silent, deliberate, controlled. He carried an aura of danger but also of order, as if the world obeyed him whether he willed it or not. "Good morning," he said simply, his dark eyes assessing her. "I hope you slept despite the storm." Ilara swallowed, unsure what to say. "I slept a little. The storm kept me awake." She realized she sounded defensive, but she couldn't help it. This man unsettled her, yet she felt a strange safety in his presence, a feeling she couldn't explain. Lucian studied her silently, then nodded. "You are hiding, are you not?" Her heart jumped. How could he know? She forced herself to keep her voice steady. "Yes, I needed a safe place for the night." "You have found it," he said, his tone firm yet strangely gentle. "But safety requires more than walls and locks. You must understand the dangers around you, not just outside." Ilara frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he walked to the window, looking out at the churning sea. "Not everyone who seeks refuge is safe here. There are those who would follow, those who would harm you. You must trust no one blindly, except perhaps me." The words chilled her, but she also felt a strange reassurance. He was not threatening her. In fact, there was a protective air about him, something she had not felt in years. "I don't need anyone's protection," she said, her voice sharp. "I can handle myself." Lucian's lips curved into a small, almost amused smile. "Most cannot until they are tested." He turned to face her fully. "You will be tested here, Ilara. The world you fled is not gone, and this place is not as it appears." She met his gaze, dark and intense. For a moment she felt exposed, as if he could see every fear, every secret she carried. "I don't understand," she said softly. "You will," he replied. "Soon." Ilara wanted to argue, to demand answers, but something in his presence held her silent. It was not fear exactly, but a mix of awe and wariness. She had never met anyone like him, someone who commanded attention without raising his voice, whose calm contained danger like a tightly coiled spring. Lucian moved closer, his steps quiet on the carpet. "You must eat. You have strength left in your body, even if your mind is weary." He gestured toward the small breakfast tray he had arranged on the desk. Fresh bread, fruit, and warm tea awaited her. Reluctantly, Ilara sat and began to eat. Lucian remained standing, watching her carefully yet not intruding. The silence between them was heavy yet charged with an unspoken tension. Finally she asked, "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Lucian's eyes darkened slightly. "I know enough. Fear has a scent and danger has a rhythm. You carry both. You are not the first to seek refuge here, but there is something about you different." He paused, then added softly, almost reluctantly, "I protect those who are worth saving." The word struck her, though she didn't show it. Worth saving. She had not felt worthy of anything for a long time. Not until now. Before she could respond, a loud crash echoed from the lower floors, a sound of wood breaking and furniture toppling. Ilara's heart raced. "Stay here," Lucian commanded, his voice sharp now, cutting through the quiet like steel. He moved to the door, then down the hall. Ilara watched as he disappeared, long and fluid, leaving a trail of confidence and authority behind. She could hear his voice in the distance, low and controlled, confronting someone or something she could not see. Minutes passed, then silence. The storm outside seemed to hold its breath. Ilara's mind raced with questions, but before she could think further, the door opened quietly. Lucian returned, his expression calm but alert. "You are safe," he said simply. "For now." Ilara looked at him, noticing for the first time the faint line of weariness around his eyes. Despite his power, he carried a weight, a burden that seemed to press against him like a cloak. She realized that beneath his calm there was a storm of its own. "I thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here." Lucian's gaze softened slightly, though he remained distant. "You would have survived, but perhaps not without scars." The words lingered in the air, heavy and true. Ilara felt a strange connection forming, a bridge between two wounded souls, both haunted by pasts they could not escape. For the next hours they spoke cautiously. Lucian asked few questions, yet each carried weight, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the myth. He spoke of the hotel's history, its walls filled with stories of power, betrayal, and secrets that had been kept for generations. He hinted at dangers beyond the ordinary, forces that moved unseen, testing those who stayed within the hotel's embrace. Ilara listened, fascinated and wary. She realized the hotel was more than shelter. It was a place of power, a nexus of shadows and protection, and she had stumbled into it without knowing why. As the day wore on, their interactions became a dangerous dance. Lucian's presence was magnetic, pulling her in even as her instincts screamed to keep distance. He moved through the room with a quiet authority, a predator tempered by restraint. She found herself observing him, noticing small details, the way his eyes lingered on her, the subtle tension in his hands, the curve of his lips when he thought no one watched. And yet she resisted. She had survived by running, by trusting no one. To allow herself to feel drawn to him was dangerous, perhaps even foolish. But the pull was undeniable, a force stronger than fear, stronger than reason. Hours passed, and the hotel seemed to shift around them. Shadows lengthened, corners darkened, and the walls whispered as if aware of their presence. Ilara felt a strange sensation, as though the building itself recognized her, acknowledging her as part of its story. Suddenly, the calm was broken. A loud shout erupted from the main entrance. Ilara's heart leapt. Her ex! She stood abruptly, rushing to the window, but the rain and storm obscured everything outside. Lucian appeared behind her, his presence steady and commanding. "Stay back," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Footsteps approached rapidly from the staircase. The air grew tense, charged with anticipation. Ilara's pulse raced as she realized she could do nothing but trust him, trust the man whose reputation whispered danger in every corner of the city. The steps stopped at her door. Lucian stepped forward, his hand moving almost imperceptibly toward the wall, where a faint shimmer appeared, as if a protective barrier had been summoned. The door rattled as if someone, or something, was trying to force entry. Lucian's eyes met hers, dark and unwavering. "Do not fear," he said quietly. "I will not let anyone harm you." Ilara nodded, unable to speak. She felt the truth in his words, a strange, unshakable certainty. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that she might be safe. The barrier held. The door trembled and then went silent. Whoever had come, or whatever threat had approached, had been stopped. Ilara exhaled, her body trembling with adrenaline and relief. Lucian turned to her, his expression softening. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "But strength alone will not protect you here. You must learn to trust, to survive, to fight, and perhaps to care." Ilara's eyes met his, and in that moment she realized the truth of his words. She had spent her life fleeing, but now she was at the center of something far larger than herself, a world of power, danger, and unspoken bonds. and at the heart of it stood a man who was as terrifying as he was magnetic. She did not know what the future held, but she felt one thing clearly. Her life had changed the moment she entered this hotel, the moment she met him. And somewhere deep within the shadows of the building, she felt it watching, the hotel itself, alive with secrets, aware of her presence and ready to test her. Night fell again, heavier this time, as if the storm had never truly left. The wind screamed around the cliffs, rattling the windows of the Devero Hotel, and the sea below tossed white-capped waves like furious spirits. Inside, the hotel felt alive in ways Alara had never imagined, shadows twisting at the corners of her vision, whispers brushing her ears when no one was near. She had spent the day exploring, trying to distract herself from the unease that settled over her like a fog. The hotel was larger than she realized, with endless corridors, hidden gardens, and rooms that seemed to appear and disappear depending on the light. Something about it was magical, and yet dangerous. It was a place of power, and Alara could feel it humming beneath her feet. Lucian had been near all day, though not intrusive. He moved through the hotel like a shadow, observing, protecting, and guiding. His presence was constant, yet distant, a steady current that pulled at her, even when she tried to resist. She had begun to notice the little things. The way his eyes lingered when he thought she wasn't looking, the subtle tension in his posture when danger was near, and the faint, almost imperceptible warmth of his hand when he passed her in the corridors. Alara was tired, more from the weight of her thoughts than from the lack of sleep. She had been running her entire life, fleeing danger, fleeing heartbreak, fleeing herself. And now here, in this strange, alive hotel, she felt as if she had finally stumbled into the eye of a storm, safe, yet surrounded by power and danger that she could not fully understand. Lucian found her in the small rooftop garden just before nightfall. The garden was unusual, perched high above the cliffs, filled with exotic flowers that glowed faintly in the dim light, their scent sweet and heavy. The wind tugged at her hair, and the sea below roared like a living thing. "You should not wander here alone," Lucian said quietly, appearing behind her without a sound. Alara turned, startled but not afraid. "I needed the air," she admitted. "The hotel, it feels alive. I needed to feel something real." Lucian's eyes softened slightly. "It is alive. And it feels you. Be careful, Alara. Not everyone who comes here survives its tests," she frowned. "Tests?" He stepped closer, the wind whipping around him, dark hair moving like ink in the stormy light. "This place is bound to my family, to a legacy of power and danger. It protects those who deserve protection, but it can also reveal weaknesses, fears, and truths you might wish to ignore. You have entered its walls, willingly or not. It has chosen to reveal itself to you." Alara swallowed, feeling a shiver run down her spine. "Chosen me?" she whispered. Lucian's gaze did not waver. "Yes, that is why you are here, but being chosen does not mean you are safe. Not yet. There are forces beyond this hotel that seek to harm you and shadows within these walls that test you. You must be ready." Her heart pounded. She had thought she was running from her past, from her ex, from fear itself. But now she realized that the danger was far greater, far older, and far more complex than she had imagined. Before she could respond, the wind shifted violently, sending a shower of petals from the glowing flowers spiraling into the air. The shadows around them deepened unnaturally, and the faint whispers in the air grew louder, forming words she could almost understand. "Lucian," she began, fear and wonder mixing in her voice. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he raised a hand and the shadows recoiled slightly as if obeying his command. "Stay close," he said finally. "Something approaches. Something from my past is something that does not forgive." Before she could ask more, a dark shape moved through the garden. Alara's breath caught in her throat. The figure was indistinct, cloaked in shadow, yet its presence radiated malice and power. Lucian stepped in front of her, his stance protective, commanding. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low but unyielding. The shadow did not answer, only shifted, the edges of its form flickering like smoke. Alara could feel its gaze on her, a hunger that made her skin prickle. Lucian's hand moved slowly to his coat, and a faint glow appeared around his fingers, a protective energy that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his heartbeat. "You will not touch her," he said, and the shadows recoiled slightly, hissing like wind through a hollow tree. Alara watched, amazed and terrified as Lucian faced the figure alone. There was no fear in him, only power and control, yet she could sense the strain beneath it. This was a man who had fought countless battles, yet every confrontation seemed to draw from him, not just his strength but his very soul. The shadow moved again, and for a moment it seemed to mimic her movements, circling, testing, watching. She realized with a jolt that it knew her, or at least knew her fear. It was not random, not accidental. "You must confront it," Lucian said softly, almost to himself, "or it will consume what it seeks." Alara's pulse raced. I don't understand. I'm not Ika." "You can," he said firmly. "You are stronger than you know. Fear has kept you alive, but courage will save you now. Trust me." The shadow lunged not at her but toward Lucian, who met it head-on. The air seemed to shimmer with energy as the two forces collided, the darkness of the shadow and the controlled power of Lucian. Alara stumbled back, her heart racing, but she could not look away. For a long moment, time seemed suspended. The wind screamed, the sea roared, and the shadows of the garden twisted unnaturally. And then, with a final, sharp movement, Lucian raised his hand, and a wave of light and energy pushed the shadow back. It dissolved into the night air, leaving only silence and the faint scent of smoke and flowers. Lucian turned to her, breathing slightly heavier than usual but calm. "It is gone for now," he said. "But you saw it, you felt it. This is only the beginning. The forces that wish to harm you are older, stronger, and more patient than you realize." Alara's hands trembled. I don't understand. Why me? Why am I part of this?" Lucian's expression softened, though it did not lose its intensity. "Because you were chosen. Because your past has led you here, and because you carry within you a strength you have not yet seen. You are bound to this place now, Alara. Not by walls, but by destiny, by choice, and by courage." She looked at him, and for the first time she saw not just the powerful, dangerous man he was, but the man who carried his own burdens, who had survived battles and losses that no one else could understand. Her heart ached for him in a way she could not explain. I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "You can," he said, stepping closer. "I will teach you, I will protect you, but you must trust yourself and me. Only then can you survive what is coming." Alara nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words. She wanted to run, to hide, to escape the shadows that seemed to reach for her at every turn. But she also felt a spark within her, a courage she had buried beneath fear and pain. She realized that perhaps, for the first time in her life, she could stand and face what came next. Lucian's gaze softened further. "You are brave even when you doubt it. That is why you were chosen. That is why you are here. And that is why I cannot let you face this alone." The night deepened, the wind howling like a living thing, and the hotel seemed to settle around them, protective yet watchful. Alara realized that she was no longer just a visitor, no longer just someone fleeing her past. She was part of this place now, part of its story, and part of the dangerous, magnetic orbit of Lucian Devereux. For the first time, she felt a strange, unshakable certainty. She was not alone, and perhaps, just perhaps, she could survive this storm. Not only the storm outside, but the storms within herself. But as she turned to leave the garden, her eyes caught a movement in the shadows. Another figure, watching, waiting, patient and silent. Alara's heart skipped a beat. Lucian noticed it too, his eyes narrowing. "The night is not over," he said quietly, "and neither is your test, but together we will face it." Alara nodded, her resolve firming. The danger was real, the shadows were relentless, and the forces at play were older and stronger than she had ever imagined. Yet standing beside Lucian, she felt a strength she had never known, the strength of trust, courage, and perhaps the beginnings of something far deeper. As they walked back into the hotel, the shadows seemed to shift, retreating slightly but not gone. Alara realized that the real trials were only beginning, and that the bond forming between her and Lucian would be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The hotel was quiet now, but the calm was deceptive. Outside, the storm had returned, heavier than ever, lashing rain against the stone walls and rattling the windows. Inside, the Devereux Hotel felt alive in every corner, as if it knew the dangers approaching and whispered warnings in shadows and light. Alara stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the halls below. Her heart raced, not from fear but anticipation. Lucian had warned her that the final trials were near. The shadows, the whispers, the unseen forces, they had been testing her, preparing her for something far greater than she had imagined. Lucian appeared beside her silently, his presence steady and commanding. "Are you ready?" he asked, his dark eyes reflecting the storm outside. Alara nodded, her hands trembling slightly but with resolve in her chest. "I think I am. I don't know exactly what will happen, but I trust you." He gave a faint, approving smile. "Trust will carry you farther than fear, but courage will save you." Together they descended the staircase. The air grew heavier as they moved through the corridors. Shadows shifted along the walls, moving with purpose as if alive. The hotel's magic pulsed beneath their feet, guiding them, warning them, and testing them. They reached the central hall, a vast chamber with high ceilings and arched windows that opened to the cliffside. The storm outside illuminated the space with flashes of lightning, casting long, twisting shadows across the marble floors. And in the center of the hall, a figure waited. It was the shadow they had sensed in the garden, but larger, more defined, and filled with an intensity that made the air seem to hum. It radiated malice, its shape flickering like smoke in the wind, and yet there was a purpose, a focus. It had come for something or someone. Lucian stepped forward, placing himself between Alara and the shadow. "This ends now," he said firmly. "You will not take her." The shadow shifted, its form rippling. A cold wind swept through the hall, carrying whispers that seemed to claw at their minds. Alara's pulse quickened, but she did not step back. She realized that this was not just a battle of power, it was a test of will, courage, and heart. Lucian's hand glowed faintly, the energy of the hotel responding to him, protecting her. "You will not win," he said. "This place, this hotel, and I, we are stronger than you." The shadow surged forward, and the hall was filled with swirling darkness and light. Alara felt the force of it pressing against her, testing her fear. But instead of fleeing, she remembered Lucian's words, "Courage will save you." She stepped forward, raising her hands instinctively. To her surprise, a warm light radiated from her, faint at first, then growing brighter. She realized that the hotel had chosen her, that its magic was responding to her courage. The shadow recoiled, hissed, and surged again, but this time, Alara did not retreat. Lucian's eyes widened slightly, admiration and surprise flickering across his face. "You have strength," he said, moving closer. "Do not doubt it. You are part of this now as much as I am." Together they faced the shadow. Lucian's energy intertwined with hers, forming a protective shield, a bond that pulsed with power and trust. The shadow lashed out, striking against the bond, but it could not break the unity of their courage and determination. Alara felt fear and exhilaration at the same time. She had spent her life fleeing, hiding from danger, hiding from herself. But now she was facing it head-on, standing beside someone she trusted, someone who believed in her even when she doubted herself. And in that moment she felt a transformation within, a courage and strength that she had never known. With a final surge of light and will, the shadow was pushed back, dissipating into the hall like smoke carried by the wind. Silence fell, heavy and complete. The storm outside began to fade, the wind calming, the rain softening. The hotel seemed to exhale, the shadows retreating, the air clearing as if acknowledging the victory. Lucian turned to her, his expression softening in a way he rarely allowed. "You did it," he said quietly. "You faced the darkness and did not falter. You have proven yourself stronger than even you realized." Alara's knees felt weak, but her heart swelled with relief and pride. "We did it," she said, looking at him. "Together." He nodded, but his eyes held a deeper intensity, a recognition of more than just the battle. "Together," he repeated. "And that is the key. You are not alone, Alara. Not now, not ever." For the first time in months, maybe years, Alara felt safe, not just from her past, but from the fear that had haunted her life. She realized that the hotel, the shadows, the tests, they had not just been about survival. They had been about transformation, about reclaiming the courage she had lost, about discovering the strength and trust within herself. Lucian reached out, taking her hand gently. It was not forceful, not commanding, but steady, grounding. "You have changed," he said softly. "And so have I. Perhaps we have both found what we needed without even realizing it." Alara looked into his eyes, dark and deep, filled with a storm of emotions, pain, power, but also care and respect. I never thought I could trust anyone again," she admitted. "But I trust you." A faint smile touched his lips, rare and genuine. "Then perhaps you are finally free," he said. "Free from fear, free from the past, and ready for whatever comes next." They walked together to the balcony, overlooking the cliffs and the calming sea. The first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, painting the waves with gold and silver. The hotel behind them seemed quieter now, peaceful, as if satisfied that its wards and tests had been honored. Alara took a deep breath, feeling the wind on her face. She realized that she was no longer the same person who had fled here, terrified and uncertain. She had faced her fears, stood beside a man of great power and mystery, and discovered strength she never knew she possessed. Lucian stood beside her, silent, but his presence was a reassurance. "The past may return," he said quietly, "but it will no longer control you, and whatever comes, we will face it together." Alara nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Together," she echoed. As they stood there, the sound of a distant horn reached their ears, carried by the morning breeze. A letter appeared at the edge of the balcony, sealed with a mark that Alara did not recognize. Lucian's brow furrowed slightly as he took it, breaking the seal carefully. He read the words inside, his expression unreadable at first, then thoughtful. "It seems our story is not yet finished," he said finally. "Another force stirs, one from my past, but now we are ready, together." Alara looked at him, feeling the bond between them strengthen in ways that went beyond words. She had come to this hotel seeking safety, and she had found it. She had come to escape fear, and she had discovered courage. And in Lucian, she had found something she had never expected: trust, understanding, and perhaps a love born from shadows and storms. The sea sparkled in the morning light, the cliffs strong and unyielding. And above it all, the Devereux Hotel stood, silent yet alive, holding its secrets, its power, and its promise. Alara knew that her life had changed forever. The darkness she had fled from had brought her to a place of light. And standing beside Lucian, she realized that whatever dangers lay ahead, she would face them not as a victim, not as someone running, but as a woman who had discovered her strength, her courage, and the bond that would guide her through anything. And as the sun rose fully, bathing the hotel in golden light, Alara allowed herself to hope, not just for safety, not just for survival, but for a future filled with trust, courage, and the beginnings of something extraordinary with the man who had saved her, guided her, and awakened the power within her. The hotel, still alive in the shadows and the halls, seemed to hum in approval, as if acknowledging that its new chapter and theirs had begun.